If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
You are listening to Mindshock. This is Bruce McGuire. I'm going to throw something at the listeners out there. A mind-shocking idea that will lead to even more questions, more logical examinations. But in the world of conspiracy and just general psychology, should this one thing be taught in public or government schooling around the world? Would this one thing prevent a lot of the zombie-like madness we see with the sheep, the lemmings that are the masses? Once again, if you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. If you like the podcast, hit that like button, and feel free to share this podcast across social media platforms. If you know anybody interested in the logical examination of conspiracies, the paranormal, and true crime cases focused on neutral, objective, and scientific analyses, introduce them to Mindshock, the one-of-a-kind podcast where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. You could also check us out on Twitter, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for topic case requests, can submit interviews or debates for in-depth logical analyses. And you could also check out our Facebook page. Make sure to like and follow for exclusive content. So, what am I talking about? I am talking about how to brainwash a human being. Should this be curriculum taught in school mandatory? Would that push logic and reason to the forefront? Because if you understand how to brainwash a human being, would that make you yourself less susceptible to such brainwashing? And of course, those that have been researching these topics for a long time, I don't believe any logical, in-the-know person would think that they would ever teach this ever. Because that would undermine the entire establishment, the entire institutional narrative of authority upon the masses not only being required, but that it is virtuous to subvert yourself to authorities and cast the scientific method to the side, replaced with blind faith in the priests of various institutions, some of which purporting to do science, but they do nothing of the sort. They are scientismic priests. Not all of them, but many of them, because if something does not adhere to the scientific method, then it is not scientific, it is religious, and if you are taking it on faith, then you are not being scientific or logical yourself. So, in brainwashing an individual, how would you do this? You would surround them and bombard them with propaganda. One only has to study the very, very basic history of Maoist China, Stalinist Russia, or Hitler's Germany. All of these things, the propaganda spin. I mean, these people, they were able to get the citizens to go along with just complete insanity. I think there's an old saying, I don't remember where I heard this, but there's an old Russian saying. There was an announcement by a government official, report to the gallows for hanging. And the citizens say, should we bring our own rope? And that just goes to show those blindly indoctrinated into the cult of state and authority worship, they can't see their own chains. Now, how did this come to be? That is the question. And those interested in history, even a base level of history, they've been thinking about this. If you even look at Horace Mann's public education system in the United States, what was it modeled after? It was modeled after these European systems, the Prussian system in particular, where some of the goals were to prevent soldiers in the front lines from running away because the kings, queens, monarchs, rulers, aristocrats, they need these people to fight for them so they can make more money and get more power. So they need to brainwash these masses into the cult of nationalism, in one sense, where they're willing to give their lives and fight to defend a flag in their country. Now, when you take a step back and look at that objectively, like pretend to be an alien flying around in a spaceship. I'm not alleging that aliens are real, but if they were, if you're an alien flying around in a spaceship, what do you think of these random humans willing to throw away their lives, willing to do irreparable damage, emotional, financial, to their families to defend a country and ideal? What is this patriotism, nationalism? Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to believe in certain ideals, and that's part of the trick, where these monarchs, kings, queens, governments, they're able to trick people into amalgamating these very good ideals, liberty, freedom, justice, all these things, and they kind of blend it in with the flag and nationalism. So under the guise of when you're making all of, like, if the military industrial complex is profiteering, which, if people don't know about that, you should read the book War is a Racket, written by decorated Marine Smedley D. Butler. Eye-opening book for its time. I think it was written in 1953 or somewhere around there. But yeah, so when you indoctrinate and brainwash the population, and again, social engineering plays a big role, because who are these masters and controllers dictating the way society needs to be? And is the greatest trick they ever pulled in convincing the world they don't exist? We've heard that one before, right? Because what better way to cover it all up by getting your own population to turn on any of the critical thinkers, aka conspiracy theorists, not anti-coincidence theorists, those who don't fall in line in being hardcore coincidence theorists who cannot examine any kind of coincidences, anomalies, connect any dots, think critically, employ deductive reasoning of any kind. So these people will all jump on the dissident, logical, critical thinkers, exposing this charade. And this is known as the Mr. Smith effect as well. I've gone over this in several podcasts. So what better way to control the population? Now, when you bombard people with all this high-level propaganda, I mean, how much money is pumped into the propaganda system? And if you have all these systems relying on each other, like, again, we can go back to tobacco science, in quotations for the science part, how institutions and governments, how they maintain control, how they spin narratives and propaganda, where they all end up supporting each other so they can't blow the whistle on each other. And now we're seeing this again in politics too. You have certain individuals who are, I mean, you could look at the whole blackmail, human trafficking situation. Everybody's got dirt on everybody, so nobody can blow the whistle on anybody without exposing themselves. Now, again, is this all by design? So when you brainwash a population, if you have all of these institutions and systems in place that rely on the propaganda to support all of them, so it's all like a gigantic house of cards, and you have all these different cards supporting each other, you expose one, the whole thing comes crashing down. So when you have institutionalized science, institutionalized medicine with corrupt big pharma, you have all these things, the CDC, all these government ties. You have all of these pharmaceutical manufacturers serving on government boards. I mean, can anyone say conflict of interest? But this kind of inter-system support of the propaganda, you're going to get very few whistleblowers, but they're out there. And the hardcore coincidence theorists deny that any whistleblowers exist, when there have been many high-profile whistleblowers from the CDC, from Big Pharma, from the government. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And obviously, it's easier for the cognitive dissonant masses to just stick their head in the sand and pretend none of that is real. And it might not be real, but to pretend that there are no whistleblowers. They might be lying, they might be brainwashed themselves, we don't know, or they might be telling the truth. So to not even hear the case, I mean, if you're interested in the truth, you're not going to just stick your fingers in the ear and sing la 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 like the cognitive dissonant masses do. The hardcore coincidence theorists, that's just how they operate. But if it was taught in school to school children, the earlier the better, probably, of how to brainwash an individual, how propaganda works, because even when looking at, again, communist China, communist Russia, socialist Nazi Germany, you look at these countries and you don't really learn in depth on the propaganda spin per se. Because if you focus too much on that, some people might see some parallels on the country that they're in. So it's best to avoid the exact blueprint of how to brainwash an individual. But if this was taught as part of general curriculum as a requirement with math and grammar, what kind of a population would a society that employs this in their basic public education system, what kind of society would they have? Would they be sheep and lemmings that just go along with whatever? They just go to McDonald's, drink their Coca-Cola, watch their TV, don't ask questions, pay your taxes, don't think about anything. Or, they create little boxes. You're allowed to think in these boxes. Some of the boxes are labeled controversial, so the people think that they're actually thinking critically and outside the box and have extreme views when they're still in the approved they're still within the approved boxes. They might be steps ahead of those around them, so it gives them the illusion, the one-eyed man in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. It gives them that illusion, and then everybody's happy, and the masters and controllers don't get exposed. The propaganda spin continues, and there's no problem. But what does it take to really brainwash an individual if they're just inundated with this propaganda for all sides? I mean, you could look at anything. Government is necessary, and I'm not saying whether it is or it isn't, but the propaganda suggests that. The propaganda against any kind of anarchy, against any kind of no rulers situation. Even when you discuss the non-aggression principle, if taxation is theft, how does that work? But these are questions that aren't really asked by most people. They're not discussed. It's just sort of accepted. So when you indoctrinate and brainwash a human being, you inundate them with all of this just information and propaganda, and it's religious in nature because there's no logical support for it. Children are taught the virtue of regurgitating on command whatever the teacher said, whatever the curriculum says. Is that any different than in a religious school? You go to Bible school, seminary school, whatever, some other type of religion. I mean, I don't know, some of those, some kind of satanic worshiping school in some other country. I don't know. You could pick up the most extreme examples. When you're taught something is a fact without stating why it's a fact, and it's even kind of the propaganda spin against children asking why, that's been turned into a joke. And kids are kind of viewed as annoying that ask, why this, why that, why this, and they keep asking why. And I think part of that whole propaganda spin with the why is because the adults don't really know and they can't really prove it, and the subconscious is triggered in knowing that these are just religious, faith-based views that could be completely wrong, but the conscious mind can't rectify it because most of these adults are so mentally weak, so cognitive dissonant, they just can't. It's too difficult. It's like asking an obese person to just roll off the couch and run a marathon in under 3 hours. It's just not happening. There's a lot of training that needs to be done, and if the training was never done, what are you going to do? And again, so with psychology, now obviously psychology is a field of study, but it's not really taught at the lower levels, and institutional psychology is really the only thing that's taught in the upper levels and in college. But part of how to brainwash a human being would involve a lot of psychology. So if this was all taught elementary school and in the lower grades, you would have a completely different society. Dare I say, an intelligent, high-functioning society. Maybe not a lot of crime. Maybe not a lot of corruption. Without the subjugation and exploitation, what do you got? So the other really big brainwashing point, and I've seen this time and time again, this gets brought up in medical debates, people that logically question vaccines the same way they would logically question tobacco science or sugar science. They would question the veracity of certain studies. They're attacked and labeled, extremist fringe kooks and all this stuff just for desiring adherence to the scientific method and proof of that adherence. I mean, they're heretics. So one of the propaganda spins is our modern society, Western societies, are so great. Our standard of living is so high. And again, all of this is faith-based, and all of it is kind of this strange black and white fallacy on top of all these other countless fallacies. how do you know what society would be like without all of the corruption? Without all of the exploitation, brainwashing, all of these things? You don't know if it would be a lot better. Now, I'm not saying it would or wouldn't be. I'm just saying if you don't know, you're just going to go along with the propaganda and pretend we have the greatest society that ever could be, or close to that of, and pretending that anybody questioning scientism would rather have some kind of medieval society. Once again, the victors write the history books. If you haven't checked out Mindshock Altered History, check out our podcast series on whether or not history was altered, how would we know, and how far back does the lie, the cover-up go about history itself. So, not to go down the really, really deep rabbit holes of earlier civilizations having more advanced technologies and all of these things, but when you brainwash a population into thinking that these other cultures, other societies that either came before or exist in third world countries are so much worse, and that we have to worship the priests of authority in every single way in order to have a better life, this is how people are brainwashed. So learning not only logic and reason, but psychology and how to brainwash somebody. If these were tenets, if these were all core tenets of the public education system, we would be seeing an entirely different society out there. I don't know if there'd be a lot of people walking around in zombie drone-like states, unable to question, unable to reason, unable to deduce anything for themselves, and just being reduced to having to trust and take on blind faith as gospel truth the words of whatever experts, whatever priests posing as experts choose to tell them based on other information that may or may not be true. It's a house of cards across the board. So, hope you guys out there enjoyed another edition of the Mindshock podcast, providing food for thought unlike any other. If you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Make sure your device allows those notifications to come through. Also, hit that like button. Feel free to share the podcast across social media platforms. Make sure to like and follow our Facebook page for exclusive content. And you could also check us out Twitter, Reddit, and Patreon. Any questions, comments, theories, rebuttals, leave them in the comments section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.